Meeting's come to order. Thank you very much. I see Delegate Reed. He's asked to come up first, if that's okay with Chairman Bullock. Okay. Delegate Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe that there is a substitute before the subcommittee.
Do I have a motion to move the substitute?
I'll move the substitute, Mr. Chairman.
It's been moved, and do we have a second? Seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. All right, substitutes before us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members of the subcommittee. What we're looking at doing here is that we have issues across large swaths of rural parts of Virginia where they have difficulties being able to finance their emergency communications infrastructure. The bill, as it was originally written, was going to establish a program and a fund and transfer money into it, and it's been decided that at this particular point in time, it's better if we do some additional analysis to understand what the cost of this would be and be sure that we're talking to all the right stakeholders. And so the intent of the bill as it has been substituted is to be able to actually do that analysis to capture the cost, not only and to identify the full scope of the problem, capture the cost, and then identify what would be the cost of finding and replacing the systems that are out there that need to be replaced. And so that's the legislation that is before you now, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Delegate. Do you have anybody in the audience who wants to speak for or against the bill? Nope. Okay. Any questions, motions? Okay, it's been moved to report with substitute. The clerk will open the roll. The clerk will close the roll. The bill reports 8-0. Thank you, Delegate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members.
Delegate Bulova.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. This is House Bill 1711, and I believe we have a substitute. For the substitute, Mr. Chairman.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of substitute, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, the bill's before us.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So the purpose of House Bill 1711 is to formalize the establishment of the Mass Violence Care Fund in the Code of Virginia. Just by a little way of background, Governor Youngkin included in his 2023 budget $10 million from the general fund to help the victims of mass violence. We do currently have the Virginia Victims Fund that covers some of these costs. However, reimbursements requested from those have to be done within a year of the event. And many of the reimbursements, particularly dealing with psychological and emotional injuries, are capped. So it's meant to deal with the immediate impacts. The purpose of the Mass Violence Care Fund is to deal with the long-term financial impacts of mass violence events. And so this can include the reimbursement for costs of physical impacts as well as psychological impacts such as depression and PTSD. I think the major point here is I think we all understand, particularly when we're dealing with psychological impacts, it can take years for those to manifest themselves and years to be able to work through the emotional pain that these kind of events cause. While the $10 million has already been allocated, it's sitting in central appropriations. The budget directed that a work group be put together in order to determine how the program would be organized and administered. It included a good group of representatives from state agencies as well as victims groups. And this bill reflects the results of that. Just in terms of some of the mechanics, you can't apply to the fund until 2 years after the event, right? So it's meant to be a fund of last resort after other items have been exhausted, capitalized with the current $2 million appropriated in 2023. So it's a separate non-reverting fund. Disbursements will be capped at the amount of interest generated by the capital investment. So this is more like a foundation or a trust. Investments will be made by the Department of Treasury, and then one of the big things was it'll be administered by the Workers' Compensation Commission. This is the same group that already administers the Virginia Victims Fund, so they already have expertise in this area and are well prepped to be able to put together further guidelines. Mr. Chairman, that is the bill, and appreciate your consideration.
Thank you, Delegate. Do we have anybody in the audience who wants to speak for or against the bill?
Report with substitute.
Okay, we have a motion to report with substitute. Second. It's been seconded. The clerk will open the roll. Clerk will close the roll. The bill reports 8-0 with substitute. Thank you, Delegate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I see Delegate Delaney. You have HB 1967.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a substitute for this bill.
Thank you. We have it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, bill's before us with a substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the substitute really is a technical correction to a drafting error, so the numbers are correct in the substitute. This bill adjusts the current 40-40-20 funding allocation within the Commonwealth Aviation Fund, the CAF, to a 50-40-10 funding formula. 50% of the CAF would go to the commercial service airports for entitlement funding. 40% would go to commercial services, regional business airports as discretionary funding, and 10% would be dedicated to community business and local service airports as discretionary funding. In 2020, there was a code change that allotted more revenue sources for the CAF. Through maturity of the airport system, amendments to the original program and funding levels that have exceeded those at the time the CAF was created, an unintentional imbalance of funding occurred and is not aligned with the original intent of the fund. The nearly 40-year-old funding formula doesn't address how to allocate the additional revenue in the CAF. So this bill will create a new formula to appropriately allocate these funds to ensure financial support through the entitlement funding subgroup, which is well rooted in implantments and commercial service airports, and adequately supports the distribution of discretionary funds to airports in the other 3 airport role categories, which are business, regional business, community business, and local service.
Thank you, Delegate. So this would not impact total expenditures, but would modify the allocation of the current funds.
That's my understanding, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Do we have anybody in the audience who wants to speak for or against? Oh, here we go. Please state your name.
Mr. Chairman, members, Craig Campbell, Director, Virginia Department of Aviation. I think Chair Delaney did a great job of articulating this proposal. I just wanted to touch on a couple of high points if I could. First, it restores the original intent of the Commonwealth Aviation Fund, indexes the maximum and minimum funding levels for airports of all sizes that were set at an arbitrary number in the mid-1980s, corrects imbalances of the fund, as was mentioned, and provides more funding to growing general aviation airports, regional business airports. It also protects the smallest and most vulnerable airports by fencing off their funding in that one discretionary category. And it retains the combining of available all funding after January 1. So even if these percentages aren't exact, that will level out in the second half of the fiscal year. I just want to point out this is all based on thorough evaluation done by the Department of Long-Term System Needs and Airport Needs over the 20-year window and performance of the fund over the last 5 or 6 years. Also involved input from all the stakeholders and airports of all sizes from all regions of the state. And finally, I would just make the point that this does carry the strong endorsement of the Virginia Airport Operators Council, which represents Virginia's 65 public use airports. Thank you. I'll be glad to take any questions.
Delegate Sickles.
A question, Mr. Director. Can you tell us, just in layman's terms, what the improvement is so we'll be able to tell people we had this fund, we passed the bill, why is it better now?
So,
one or two sentences.
So it indexes for what's happened over time with the funding increases to the revenue itself. In the mid-1980s, for example, the entitlements were set at an arbitrary $2 million maximum, $50,000 minimum. Oh. We're now tying this to a percentage of the fund so that every couple of years we won't have to come back in and make adjustments. And it also rebalances the fund. We get into a situation now where the first 6 months of the year, there are some of the growing general aviation airports that don't have access to the funding, but they have the need, so they're standing on the sidelines for the first 6 months of the year waiting for the two funds to be combined in January. So it will fix that imbalance that is currently happening.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee?
Move to report with substitute.
We have a motion to report with the substitute. Do we have a second? It's been seconded. The clerk will open the roll. Clerk will close the roll. The bill reports 8-0 with the substitute. Thank you, Delegate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, committee.
Delegate Runyon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee.
Delegate, let's start with HB 1603. You have 2 bills.
Yes, sir. Thank you. This is a bill to adjust the short line railway Preservation Fund, Development Fund allocation. It requires no new money. The bill retains the 93% of the fund monies that go into the rail and public transportation and passenger rail authority, but it does remove the 50% cap. I'm sorry, it removes the $4 million cap. There is an amendment? Yes.
Move the line amendment.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, the amendment's been moved. It's
Thank
before
you.
us. Thank you.
What the amendment does is prevents any more than 50% of the available monies to be transferred into the short line preservation fund. And again, it's no fiscal impact. It's just rejiggering the money around. So,
Delegate, so in a sense, this is just to make it more flexible.
yes, sir.
All right, thank you, Delegate. Is there anybody in the audience who wants to speak for or against? Do we have anybody in the, here we go, hold on. Here we go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your enthusiasm. Rob Bohannon here, representing the Virginia Railroad Association. Our members are Virginia's 9 short line railroads. Thank Delegate Runyon for bringing this bill. The big issue here, like a lot of people who are in transportation, is getting more and more expensive to maintain railways. The RPF has been a great fund that has helped Virginia's short line railroads be competitive, offer a cost-effective solution for transportation of goods. The $4 million cap, it's very easy. Average project's about $1 million. The last 3 years, the average amount of requests for RPF funding have averaged $25.5 million. This doesn't solve the problem, but it does help.
Thank you. Any questions? Any comments? Any motions? It's been moved to report and seconded. As amended, the clerk will open the roll. The clerk will close the roll. The bill reports 8-0 as amended. Delegate, you have 2504.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. This bill is an attempt to address some of the challenges we're seeing in rural Virginia concerning support of our volunteer emergency service agencies. Cost of equipment has gone up. We all have experienced inflation. Those folks seem to have had hyperinflation. So this is an attempt to give an opportunity for these folks to apply for grants to be able to supplement the purchases of the various rolling stock and such in their equipment. Happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Do we have anybody in the audience who wants to speak for or against? Do we have any questions or comments from the committee? What I do notice is that you didn't request any funds to capitalize the grant program. That you've created a grant program, but there's no money in it.
Yes,
We don't like to do that here in appropriations.
I understand.
So anyway, I'm looking for a motion.
Move to table.
It's been moved to table and seconded. The clerk will open the rolls. Clerk will close the roll. The bill's been tabled on a vote of 8-0. Delegate Askew, you can report from the podium. House Bill 1992.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe we have a committee substitute.
Move the substitute, Mr. Chairman.
Do we have a second? It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, it's substitutes before us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, with the substitute, the bill has become a Section 1 bill that we have created a study, and we're looking to seek the Secretary to study the sustainability of this funding. But I want to would like to speak about some of the issues we've been dealing with in Virginia. We're continuing to face significant challenges in emergency management due to severe storms. We've seen hurricanes have a terrible effect on the Southwest Virginia. These events have caused homeowner insurance to rise in some parts of the state, and insurance carriers to drop and to leave. We are looking in November. Virginia requested $4.4 billion from the federal government for recovery costs related to Hurricane Helene, and only $30 million of that was related to mitigation efforts to prevent and prepare for this fund. So I know this is a study bill now, and I'm looking forward to the Department of Emergency Management and the Department of Planning and Budget and the Virginia Emergency Management Association to look at some of these issues and the funding and look for continued sustainability, so we can hire additional individuals to prepare for the next natural disaster. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Delegate. Do we have any questions from the Committee, anybody, is there anybody in the audience who wants to speak for or against the bill?
I want to support the bill. I think it's a matter of time before Virginia is hit with.
Oh, hold on, can you just identify yourself?
Oh, sorry. I'm Bernie Doon from District 27. Sorry. I was prepared to speak to another bill, but I just wanted to jump in here. I think it's only a matter of time before Virginia feels the impacts of one of the natural disasters that we're facing with climate change and things that are transpiring in the world. So I want to offer my support, and I hope that it passes today. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, Rob Bohannon, representing the Virginia Emergency Management Association. These are largely your local emergency managers. You're going to hear from one here in a second. But one point I wanted to make, one of the reasons that this is important, and I've heard about, obviously, localities having their needs. We have a great state agency in the Virginia Department of Emergency Management, great partner. They are 2/3 funded by federal grants. And those are grants that went down 10% last year. 9/11 was kind of the high watermark of interest in this, and every year they've gone down. And we're expecting probably more cuts at the federal level. Those grants, oftentimes, VDEM has the ability to pass through some of those to the localities. The average amount a locality gets is about $7,500, and they match it to $15,000. As you can imagine, that doesn't really go a long way. But VDEM is relying upon 2/3 of their core functions are from those federal grants. So they're feeling the squeeze there, which in turn is harder on the localities, which is the need. We got to find a way to solve this problem and think about how we can do that. Appreciate the study language. I think that'll be helpful too. But you'll hear from someone who's actually in the field here as well.
Thank you. And I just want to remind the committee that last week we had a great presentation from VDEM, and so we know a lot about this issue.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee. My name is Will Drury. I'm the Vice President of the Virginia Emergency Management Association, and I'm honored to be here in front of you to speak in support of HB 1992, which, as you know, would establish the Virginia Emergency Management Preparedness and Capabilities Grant Program. This bill is an essential step towards creating a culture of preparedness across the Commonwealth, ensuring that localities, whether rural, suburban, or urban, have the resources and infrastructure they need to respond to and recover from emergencies. The $5 million fund proposed in this bill will provide grants to localities, helping them hire full-time emergency management professionals, upgrade their emergency operations centers, and develop or update emergency plans. Currently, only 53% of Virginia's emergency management coordinators are full-time, and nearly half report insufficient staffing. Many localities rely on part-time individuals or individuals who wear multiple hats like myself to complete these functions, leaving critical emergency management responsibilities unfunded and often overlooked. This bill will close that gap, enabling localities to build dedicated, well-trained emergency management teams that can lead on planning, mitigation, and response efforts. Importantly, HB 1992 reflects the principle that every disaster starts and ends locally. Local governments are the first responders, and they are responsible for providing the preparedness, response, and recovery phases for any emergency. By providing targeted funding to improve local capabilities, we have an opportunity to not only enhance public safety, but also reduce the long-term economic impact of disasters. Research shows that for every dollar invested in preparedness, $13 is saved in avoided damages and economic recovery. After Hurricane Helene, as the delegate stated, Virginia requested $4.4 billion in recovery funds, but only 14% of that was allocated to mitigation and preparedness. HB 1992 shifts the focus towards prevention and proactive planning, reducing future reliance on costly federal disaster relief. Finally, this bill includes a work group to study long-term funding solutions for Virginia's emergency management needs. This ensures that we're not just reacting to emergencies, but planning for sustainable solutions to build resilience into our state's infrastructure and operations. We as an association strongly urge you to support HB 1992, and we believe that it's a strategic investment in Virginia's future, one that will save lives, reduce cost, and strengthen the ability of our communities to respond to and recover from emergencies. Thank you for your time and consideration. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I have one for you.
Sure.
So you mentioned 53% of localities have just full-time. The rest don't. But actually, are there some localities that don't have anybody at all?
There are many localities across the state where the Title IV Emergency Management Coordinator is oftentimes a county administrator, building official, fire official, or someone like myself who wears many hats in fire and rescue.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. Yes, and this is something we need to deal with in going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments or questions from the committee?
Mr. Chairman, I have a motion.
Delegate Sickles.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we report the substitute to House Bill 1992.
It's been moved and seconded that we report the substitute for House Bill 1992. The clerk will open the roll. The clerk will close the roll. The bill reports with substitute on a vote of 8-0. Thank you. That concludes our docket. And do I have a motion to adjourn?
What's going next?
Oh, yeah, and just so you know, next, before we adjourn, I'm just going to give you the next up is Commerce, Ag, and Natural Resources, and that could be within the next 15 minutes. All right, we are adjourned.